So it's great to be with you once again. My name is Jeff Fuller, and you are listening to Jay Fuller Interviews. Jay Fuller Interviews on YouTube. You can certainly subscribe there. Go to the Facebook group and join. We're also on Instagram and Twitter, Jay Fuller Interviews. I certainly believe that people's stories make our story much better and more impactful if we would just listen and share what they have to say. And I have a great one, personal favorite today. This is Steve Hale joining, former North Carolina guard. Steve, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well. First question, maybe not the most important question, but I'm always curious by why did you choose number 25 when you were at North Carolina?
That's a really interesting question. I was 34 in high school, and I always liked the number seven. So I thought I would try something that added to seven, but I didn't want to be 34, so I picked 25, and it was one of the numbers that was available when I was given an opportunity.
And congratulations. I understand that your youngest son, Josh, just got married. And so congratulations with that. I remember your older son, I believe James Hale, was participating in a 3-point competition and he broke out the number 25 vintage Carolina jersey. Was that truly your original Carolina jersey that he wore?
It was a practice jersey
Okay.
that he wore that had my name. We had our name and North Carolina in the back. I think, still have my real jersey somewhere in the attic if it hasn't been eaten by mice or moths somewhere.
Hey, so I asked Buzz Peterson the other day. I was privileged enough to interview him. What he did with that $200 that Coach Smith left to him that was publicized, he left to all the players. So, what did you do with the check from Coach Smith?
I went out to eat with my family with it. So that was one of the things that he had mentioned in his letter. And I can't remember who was at home then, but I took everybody who was home, all the kids that were home, out to eat that on that money. That was a very special thing that he did, very, very much in his character.
And I was just going to ask that about Coach Smith. When you heard that he passed, were you shocked, or what emotions did you feel having Coach Smith play such a big role in your life?
I wasn't shocked because he had been ill for a while. After a surgery that he had gotten ill, and so he'd been sick for a while. It was a loss. I had been away from North Carolina for a while, maybe 15, 20 years by then. But I had seen him in the last couple of years when I go back to Chapel Hill. So it was a loss, and it's interesting that you bring him up because he was a contemporary of John Thompson, who just passed. Yeah. And I remember Coach Smith didn't talk about a lot of other coaches, but he talked about how much he respected Bobby Knight and how much he respected John Thompson. And I think he and John Thompson had a lot of similarities, and Coach Smith really respected basically that they cared about the player as an individual before they cared about the player as a player.
And at least I know, for me, from reading and studying both Coach Thompson and Coach Smith, would stand up for the minority and just be that voice. How important is that, or was that for you to see and witness from Coach Smith, but also from Coach Thompson from afar?
Well, I didn't know a lot of the history of Coach Smith when I joined because, I was, by the time he was doing a lot of his groundbreaking work, it was in the 60s when I was born.
Yeah.
But my father was a basketball coach, and so we had always had different ethnicities kind of in our house growing up, and so that was, for me, was always just seemed natural, and so it was pretty seamless going to North Carolina. But I certainly didn't know the history of what they went through, or a lot of the Black players in the 60s went through to kind of integrate the area, which was pretty amazing.
And Steve, you grew up in Oklahoma. I know we kind of laugh here in Vermont that there's an AAU program for everybody. When you were growing up, was there AAU? Was it just the summer camps, Nike camps, ABC camps that went on? Or where did you play outside of the high school basketball season?
So there was none of that. I played in my backyard. Is where I played, and then I would get together with some friends and would play, and then we would go down to Tulsa to a park and play. So there wasn't any AAU. In fact, my senior year, there was one team that just started that had Mark Price and Wayman Tisdale on it, And I thought, I've never heard of that. I wonder how they got on that team. So I actually got noticed just through playing high school. And then I went to a basketball camp in Pittsburgh between my junior and senior year. And that's where all the coaches went. There were several hundred coaches at that one. So I went to one camp for a week, played pretty well. And when I got home a couple weeks later, there were several hundred letters waiting for me. But no teams. I didn't play on any other team besides my high school team all through high school. Hard to believe nowadays.
Yeah, it is. Steve, when you were growing up, did you like basketball immediately, or were there other sports that you tried when you were younger?
I liked it the most because my dad was a coach, and so I used to walk home from elementary school and stop off at the gym, which was between school and home, and watch him coach practice, and then just hang out until he was ready. So I loved the gym. I did play some baseball, which I really enjoyed. I loved all sports. When I moved to Oklahoma, they wanted me to play football, but I was scared because those guys were so big. And I was like, I'm going to get hurt playing football in Oklahoma. So I never ventured there, but did play some baseball along with the basketball.
And so having your dad as a coach, was that fun, good? I know I heard somebody said a couple years ago that if you're a coach, you want your kid to be the best player or the worst player. When they're in the middle, it can be difficult for them and for you. What are your thoughts on that?
That's an interesting quote. My dad was great, actually. He was involved in that. He encouraged me, but he was never overbearing. So he would let me do whatever, never pushed me. Never gave me any instruction unless I asked. So he really did a good job of not putting extra pressure on me. And so I loved being around the game and when he coached, but I never felt pressure from him at all, which was great.
Yeah, sorry about my dog barking in the background, but that
adding some extra advice for you.
Yeah, I guess. Hey, did you have any siblings growing up?
I had an older brother and an older sister. Yeah.
Did you feel like that pushed you to be a better player, or did you kind of feel like you were always in their shadow?
No, my sister was the oldest. She wasn't really an athlete. My brother was an athlete reluctantly. He played, but didn't really love it. And so I was the one that kind of loved the game. My brother made me tough because he was a senior when I was a freshman. So he used to beat up on me every day in practice. He told coach if there had to be a freshman on the team, he was going to make sure he wasn't a wimp. So he beat me up pretty good for a number of years to make sure I could handle it.
And you talked about loving the game. I found it interesting when we met, I don't know, several years ago when you were selected by the New Jersey Nets, 1986, number 81st pick, that you had mentioned that you no longer had the love for the game. When did that begin to diminish? When did you know that you weren't going to pursue basketball any longer as far as a career?
Yeah, about halfway through my senior year of college, it just became difficult to go to practice in terms of I used to love to practice and love to put extra time in. And all of a sudden I realized that passion that I had kind of had gone away. And I also at that time earlier in that year was had become interested in medicine. And so I had applied to med school my senior year and really had just gotten more excited about medicine than basketball. And so it was pretty dramatic I kind of lived for basketball for that whole time. And for me, it was really over just a few months that I realized, all right, I think I'm going to head a different direction.
Can you just share a little bit when you were coming out of high school, you received all those letters following the camp. What led you to choose Chapel Hill versus some of the other schools that had kind of sent you letters or tried to get you to be a part of their program?
Well, there's a couple of things. One is they were very good. So the year I was a senior was the year they won the national championship. So they were on TV all the time and they were really good. And then I had a decision. I had some schools locally around in the Midwest that were interested in me, who I thought I could play for, but I didn't know if I was good enough to play at North Carolina. So I decided I could either, and I asked my dad, I said, I can go to these other places and probably play, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to play here. And he goes, well, if you don't try, you'll never be able to play. You'll never know. So it was more for that. I was interested in the challenge. And then when I visited, it was really the people. I liked the players a lot. I loved all the coaching staff. It was very professional. They treated me well. I thought it would just be a good fit. So the clincher, I'd also gone to Duke and Arkansas where they had my other choices then. But the clincher was really the teammates and the people that I met that I felt like this would be a good fit for me.
And it's been much publicized that you were part of the team that Michael Jordan did play on. And it was stated that Michael Jordan said you were one of the toughest defenders he ever faced. When you saw Jordan, when did you realize that this cat could play?
Summer before my freshman year. So back then, we would come in. Well, they still do come in the summertime and start working out, and so I came in the summer, maybe July or August, a few weeks before school, and we'd have pickup games every afternoon, and it would be anybody who was at North Carolina then or had played for North Carolina. So back then, the pros didn't have as many commitments or contracts where they couldn't play. So we'd have 10 or 15 pros play. And so during those pickup games, Mike was just destroying everybody. And the guys that he were destroying were in the NBA, and some of them were all-stars in the NBA. And I knew them because I've been watching them for years. And so seeing them up close and seeing really over that year him realize his potential and how hard he worked was really inspiring. But I saw him do some things that summer that surprised him and everybody else.
So those alumni games are definitely legendary. When you got to play in those following or as an alum, what was it like when some of those kids on the team kind of looked at you with eyes wide open and they couldn't believe that they played against the great teams and yourself that had great success at Carolina?
Well, that's one of the things that really makes North Carolina and some of the other programs so valuable is that we embraced one another as we're part of the same team. So when I was in college, the guys that were in the pro would come up and introduce themselves to me and talk to me. And I thought, wow, why are these guys talking to me? I'm nobody. But you were accepted just kind of the minute you walked on campus. So you got to know each other socially, and they really pulled for each other. And so by the time you were on the court, it was just like playing with any of your other teammates. So a lot of the younger guys, they weren't awe-inspired very long because they were all very good. And so if you didn't play well, somebody much younger than you would show you up pretty quickly.
So a mutual friend of ours, Jeff Springer, we were talking, he probably shared this story without your permission, but he said how you were reminiscing one time, and I believe it was with your son, maybe it was with Jeff's, but you were at the Dean Dome, and you were on the floor, and somebody asked you who let you win. And then once you said, "I'm sorry, I'm Steve Hale," they were so apologetic for even questioning you being on the court. Does that make you feel uncomfortable that strangers know your name? They understand the teams, the players that have gone through North Carolina?
It is a little odd for me. I didn't grow up with that because I didn't grow up in Oklahoma. In North Carolina. I grew up in some in Idaho and some in Oklahoma. So I wasn't really versed in how rabid the fan base is there. So it was flattering, but a little overwhelming, and didn't make a lot of sense to me. Like, why are these people so crazy over an 18-year-old? And it's one of the reasons, honestly, that after college and medical school, I moved somewhere else because I didn't want to be known for what I did when I was 18. Right. I felt like if I want to be good at something else, or I have to move away. So it was always a little different. Now people, guys who grew up in the area around ACC basketball, they were just kind of used to that. But for me, it was strange. My parents felt like it was strange. They never really got used to it either. So the rabid fan base is a unique entity.
And now being a pediatrician here in Vermont, you've been here some time. And I remember you mentioning to me that it was kind of nice that maybe 1 out of 40 people would recognize you here, where if you would have stayed in Carolina, it was probably 39 out of 40 people. How have you enjoyed Vermont and distancing yourself from your childhood, your adolescence, your college years? Has it been nice, or do you kind of miss those memories, especially as you get older and you've seen your kids grow up playing sports and being a part of basketball and what meant so much to you?
Yeah, I've really enjoyed my time in North Carolina. It's a wonderful place and wonderful place to raise kids. I'm not a very nostalgic person, so again, I feel like I'm focused on what I've done today and what I'm going to do tomorrow. So sometimes living in the past, it'd be hard to be there and to talk about stuff that I did years and years ago over. And I don't mind doing it, but over and over again all day was a little much for me. So it's nice to take a break from that. And again, a lot of the Carolina guys really like it and settle down in that area and kind of is inbred in terms of who they are. But it was just not how I was raised or doesn't fit my personality.
Hey, a couple questions, and we'll get you out. Steve Hale, make some time. Thanks so much for your generosity. We mentioned the late Coach Thompson and just what he meant to the basketball world, Coach Smith as well. The Duke-Carolina rivalry, it kind of took legs after your time. Do you remember Coach K, or when did Coach K kind of get a name in your mind of, wow, Duke's going to have a successful program?
So yeah, Coach K recruited me and flew out to Oklahoma, and I met with him. And again, he was along with Arkansas at the time and North Carolina. Those were my three top schools. And honestly, he was great, nice. I was impressed. I had no idea he would be as successful as he was. Duke had been good for a while, had been down kind of when he was recruiting me. And so I took a visit there and just felt like North Carolina would be a bigger fit. He brought in a great class without me. He obviously didn't need me. So the class he brought in was great and went to their first national championship. But you never know. Like even when I played with Mike, I knew he was really good, but I didn't know he would be considered the best of all time. I mean, you just don't have that sort of level. Same thing with Coach K. I thought this is, I respect him. He seems really honest and hardworking, but I had no inkling he would be a Hall of Fame coach.
Hey, so when you look back at your time at North Carolina, so many stories. I find it interesting talking to you, speaking with Buzz Peterson the other day, even David Chadwick, pastor down in North Carolina, how it's that you guys kind of laugh at how people remember games and moments and stories and stats. Just talk to me a little bit about what is your favorite Carolina moment for you personally?
Oh, wow. That's a really difficult one. I don't know that I have a moment that stands out to me. Probably, my best game, probably, I guess the one that stands out would be when the Dean Dome opened and we played Duke. We were both highly ranked and we won that game and I had a good game. So that kind of stands out. But, it was always more in retrospect. We never won a national championship when I was there. So every season ended with a loss. So that was always kind of disappointing. And when I played, I expected to win. And so when we won, it was like, well, that's what we expected. When we lost, it was kind of devastating. So, as time goes on, it's more the relationships. So when I think back about my time, I think about the time with the coaches and the players and the people. So the games fade a little bit. You're right. People there. I mean, I remember when I first walked in as a freshman and this guy on our floor walked in and introduced himself and then proceeded for the next 2 hours to like detail everything that had happened in the last 15 years, stats and guys who'd played 3 games and played 2 minutes and made 1 rebound. And I was like, wow, this is not Oklahoma anymore.
Yeah. I got to let you go. I apologize. I just got a text message from my wife that she needs a AAA card. So that probably is not great. But thank you so much. I'd love to get you back on and we'll talk some more. Final question is, who was your favorite coach? Who was the best coach and why?
So my favorite coach was probably my high school coach, Joe Holliday. He was actually coach with Coach Williams at Kansas and then at North Carolina as well. And he kind of taught me how to play. So as a freshman in high school, he brought me up to the varsity and we used to have 3.5-hour practices that were pretty much all drills. So he prepared me to be able to play at a higher level. And I still have a great relationship with him and he's been a real mentor to me. And again, probably my favorite coach.
Well, Steve, thanks again. I apologize, but thanks for making the time. We'll talk again soon. And I need to work on my golf game. But when I golf with you, it just means we have more time together because I'm taking so many swings. So
excellent. We're out in the woods together.
That's what happens. Hey, Steve, have a great one. Thanks again.
See you, Jeff.
And again, that's my time with Steve Hale. We'll be back shortly. Jay Fuller Interviews on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Thanks all.